So first things first, how to be successful as a remote worker. I think there's several variables that come into play, and this is something I've been experimenting with firsthand for the past couple of weeks, kind of figuring out what is a comfortable work environment. Um, if you want to be thoughtful, you can design a fancy background with lots of books to make you look smart, or to have Justin Timberlake right over your shoulder to chime in when you need him. All right. Um, Also realizing that working from bed, probably not the most productive, especially if you have to share a video screen at some point. I think it's also important to create boundaries between work and home, something that we've been experimenting with. It's like at the end of the workday to literally just go outside for 5 seconds and then come back in as if you've come home, have your laptop shut, know that, hey, after 6 o'clock or after a certain time, you don't need to be on your emails. I'm a big fan of having good morning routines. And my morning routine working from home is not to get up and check work emails, but to like put on some water for tea and start making breakfast and maybe read a book, or I'm working on learning the bass guitar while I'm home too. So like do a little jam session in the morning before you start work. I think having those boundaries can be very effective. It's also important that you kind of over communicate, which is something I'll highlight throughout the presentation tonight, and prepare for your meetings. It's nice that you can have a computer screen, or actually you've got 2 screens, to be able to have lots of notes in front of you. You don't have to have everything memorized. And you do want to make sure you're accountable and communicating well with everybody you work with, and err on the side of letting them know more often than assuming they know you're working. Like I've erred on the side of CCing my boss on emails that I wouldn't normally do if we were both in the same building together. But if I'm sending an email, and he's not going to interact with me or the other person in person for at least a couple of weeks, it's helpful for, them to just have more information about what's going on. And that kind of ties into how you can be visible at work. My organization, Halcyon's, also adapted Microsoft Teams, which is basically GChat if you've got a Microsoft Office account. So now all of our kind of colleagues are online throughout the day. We can chat easily. It also has kind of like the red icon if you're in a meeting, green if you're free, yellow if you've been away for a little while. And so another thing that's important when you're working remotely is to take care of your health and to make sure you're getting up and stretching throughout the day. I actually did a guided meditation at like 5 o'clock before this, just to kind of relax the mind, get into a good state of mind, and kind of prepare for meetings. Whether you can stretch, you want to do push-up challenges. I think one of my colleagues yesterday had a 20-minute plank challenge. Not 20 straight minutes of planking, but between 9 to 5, can you do 20 minutes of planking? That's one way to kind of stay fit while also working remotely. And then obviously take time to talk to your team. And one of the biggest challenges can be socializing and kind of the informal things you chat about in the hallway. I think it's really worthwhile at the beginning of meetings, kind of like we did in this session, just to check in on how people are doing, how's their family, how are they feeling. My organization, Halcyon, we have a daily check-in every day at 10 o'clock now for like 15 to 30 minutes, where everybody gets to at least chime in. We started the week with, gratitude, what's one thing you're grateful for. Today we shifted to rose, thorn, bud. So for those of you who aren't familiar, it's a simple kind of lap around. Rose, what's one thing you're feeling good or happy about? Thorn, what's something that's bothering you, maybe you're having a hard time with? It could be professional, it could be obviously dealing with COVID-19 related things. And then the bud is something you're looking forward to. And so again, it's a way to kind of get everybody in the organization to be able to talk, check in, see one another. And whenever possible in any of these remote work situations, having your video camera on helps a lot to make that connection and for folks to see you. As we go through, if anybody has questions or anything you want to add, feel free to raise a hand or just unmute your mic. We can go from there. All right, so now I'm going to dive into 11 best practices for working remotely. For practicing good meeting etiquette, you want to experiment each day. Is literally an experiment. There's 24 usable hours. How do you want to allocate them? What's your prime working time? When do you definitely have to be somewhere? Like I definitely have to be on a video camera at 10 a.m. every day. I don't have anything before that, And then what are the boundaries you want to create? How can you make yourself visible? How can you make time for socializing, connecting with your teammates, doing postmortems on key projects? So I actually had a postmortem meeting earlier today with Jeff and David and Ben from Georgetown about the Georgetown Entrepreneurship Challenge. So we had our first pitch competition with the Law Center yesterday, and we have, I think, 7 more pitch competitions in the next couple of weeks that I am the commissioner / moderator for. We went over, what worked well, what didn't work well, what can we do to better prepare or improve for the next one. And again, creating accountability and focusing on your team's responsibilities. Cool. So good meeting etiquette, some straightforward rules. Turn on your video and have everybody on separate screens, even if you are working with a few other people in the same location. It's much better to go in separate rooms and let everybody have their laptop so that they get their own kind of screen. People see them equally. People are more comfortable talking or chatting in the box. If you got 4 people on one keyboard, it's a little hard for everybody to chime in. As much as you can, be present and pay attention. Like, don't have your phone right here doing things. Down here, maybe if you need to, but try not to glance too blatantly. And if you are going to step away, you can very simply stop your video. Keep it on mute. Nobody needs to know that you stepped away. As soon as you come back, great, I'm here. I think that's better than having distracting things or having nothing on the screen. And then whenever possible, have agendas that you send out in advance, perhaps in a shared Google Doc that you can then add notes to during the meeting, and at the end of the meeting, recap what are the action items, who's going to be responsible for things. So lots of different experiments and variables you can play with as you're working remotely. Do you want to do it from an office, from your house? If it's safe to go outside, you want to go to a coffee shop. Be cognizant that there might be background noise or other people that can be distracting. I think we're all doing pretty good at, when in doubt, leave it on mute and then unmute it when you want to say something. You can also experiment with what times work well. Maybe if you can work from home, maybe you take a nap every day from 2 to 3. So just, don't schedule meetings during that time period. And then you can also figure out what are certain projects you want to do early in the morning versus in the afternoon when maybe there's a lull in the energy. And some folks, myself included, usually have like another burst of energy after dinner. And as you get older, a lot of people with kids will kind of come home, have family dinner, go through putting the kids to bed routine, which there's a joke in here about your parents now have to go through the routine of putting their kids to bed again, and then get back on the laptop, be able to work again for another hour or 2 in the evening. And I personally am not a big fan of listening to music, but if that gets you in the zone, if you can focus in, do it, but it might be better to stick with some silence. So a few best practices on how to improve remote communication. Over document, whether it's in emails or shared Google Docs. Make sure people know what you are working on, what meeting minutes or notes were captured. If there's ways to collaborate real time, Google Docs makes that super easy. And then I touched on this a little earlier, also sharing how you're feeling and making sure that you create space, usually at the beginning of meetings, for how are people doing. If there's any things that they personally are dealing with, it's kind of hard when you just are texting back and forth via keyboard or a computer screen. So you want to make those connections and let people know that you're there to help. So boundaries are really important. And I know you live in a connected world now. We've always got our phones, but you don't have to be working 24/7. You don't have to be working 12 hours a day. I think if you do a good job setting expectations, and some companies will say, hey, just like post a message in the Slack when you get on to start the day. And then at 4:30 or whenever you're ending your day, just post a, hey, here's what I accomplished today. I think that's a good way of kind of bookending things. I will share that when I was in grad school at Georgetown and I worked at Deloitte full time, I would work at Deloitte, go take grad classes, and then go to Frisbee practice from like 10 to midnight. And I had a habit of writing work emails but not sending them. And then I'd come home after practice and like 12:30 or 1 in the morning, I would send my work emails, which does give the impression that you're working much later maybe than you are. So there's ways to be strategic there, but I think it's at this stage of the game, I think it's much more important to be comfortable creating boundaries and not letting your boss know that, hey, I'm online late at night or on the weekends. I definitely recommend leaving your laptop out of the bedroom and like not confusing your body about if the bed is for sleeping or for working. like make that a place, kind of a sanctuary where you can relax and recharge. And then sometimes you can use props like work shoes. I'm the opposite. If you're working from home, I recommend wearing slippers because they're more comfortable. You know, you want to look professional from the waist up, but it doesn't necessarily mean you need to be in a full suit with dress shoes every day. And I touched on the idea as well of like leaving the house for a second, coming back in and being like, oh, I finished the work day. This is great. You know, let's make dinner and find time to relax. So how do you become visible and let people know you're working? So part of it is telling your manager what you're working on, giving them updates, CCing them, being visible, commenting on things in Slack, even if it's posting funny videos or just like doing a little emoji to what somebody else did. And then having recurring team meetings. I'm a big fan of Monday morning check-ins with the team. So we have like a 10:30 meeting every Monday. We kind of talk about the priorities for the week. People go over what they're working on. And then on Tuesday, I have a one-on-one 30-minute meeting with all of my direct reports. And then on Friday, I also have a check-in with our program coordinator to kind of wrap up the week. How did things go? And is there anything that we definitely need to get done before the end of the week? And in some instances, especially if you have meetings with the broader part of the company, it makes sense to have a meeting before the meeting to figure out what you're going to talk about, make sure your kind of closer team is all on the same page. And then you have kind of a united front. And there's a lesson in here too about managing up, where you don't ever want to find yourself in a meeting with a larger team where you say something and your boss is like, huh, what? I don't know what you're talking about. And this is something you'll need to practice throughout your career. And I say that because I'm still figuring it out and I'm not perfect at it. But understanding, is there a chance that your boss could be in a meeting with your boss's boss and they ask him about something and he or she has no idea about it? You want to decrease the likelihood of them looking ignorant or like they're not in the know or they don't even know what you're working on. So err on the side of over communicating up. So social times, this is an interesting one to kind of think about, especially with basically most people in the workforce right now working remotely. You really need to be deliberate and creating those things. I mentioned, before class, we had a Halcyon guided meditation breathing workshop for like a half an hour. We all had our Zoom videos on and like jumped around a little bit, got our bodies loosened up. And then I turned my video off. We did a meditation. I just laid down and, still felt like we could engage. One of the fellows was able leading it, and like seeing your CEO and COO also partaking in these activities, I think communicates a lot of positive things about the organization and mental health and well-being. And so to connect, you want to add check-ins and do it over video instead of phone whenever possible. So post-mortems is an important concept. I'm not sure you all would be familiar with it. It's basically at the end of a project, having a meeting to talk about what happened. Doesn't necessarily mean it died or like, it was terrible. Even when things go really well, you want to talk about why did it go well and identify, what were the inputs or things we did in advance to make it be successful. And then what are the key learnings or lessons that we can extract from that to be more effective in the future. So in terms of building accountability for yourself, can really easily be used with Google Calendar and kind of putting time blocks on when you're going to work for things. I would really encourage you, as you're figuring out how to finish the academic semester from home, like build out your Google Calendar, put a bunch of stuff on there, and like allocate time when you're going to work on materials for certain classes. You can move them, they're not set in stone. You do have the autonomy to adjust, but if your calendar is just blank all day and you have nothing to do and no plans, it's probably going to be kind of hard to get motivated to work on the things you need to work on. And this is definitely true for over the summer as well. Even if you don't have, 7 meetings every day, carve out a 2-hour block and say, I'm going to work on, this sales script that I need to be saying to customers, or I'm going to design this digital marketing campaign, or I'm going to even read, find resources online. Say, I'm going to spend an hour reading or researching resources on Google that can educate me about the thing I need to be accomplishing. I'm also a fan of, as you know, the field notebooks and just making to-do lists in there, crossing things out as you make progress. Cool. So we're gonna keep rolling through the presentation. This is a company has like a Slack channel for a daily update where each morning you just kind of share what you did yesterday and what you're planning to do today. And it helps to, again, create that transparency, which is really important for remote teams. So in terms of responsibilities, make sure in any meeting, whether it's remote or not, before you wrap, if there's something to be done, clarify and confirm who is the one person who's responsible for it. Oftentimes it can be very vague or like, oh yeah, we know we got to get this done. But if it just floats out there and nobody takes it, it can be hard to actually see some momentum there. I also want to empower you all to volunteer to be responsible for almost everything. If there's an idea or a new project or something that needs to get done, you can show some initiative there as an opportunity to learn. You can say, hey, I don't know exactly how to do this thing that needs to get done, but maybe you could tag team it with somebody who's more experienced, opportunity to learn from them. And again, kind of build some goodwill and rapport with your colleagues, knowing that, oh, our summer intern is willing to dive in and help with anything. And asking the question, does everyone understand? Does that make sense? Are we all on the same page? Is there anything I missed? Making sure that you kind of get that cleared. So in terms of your health, drink water. And take time to walk, whether it's a walk around the block, and this can be in the middle of the workday, if there's an errand to run. Don't feel that you need to be like locked to a computer for 8 straight hours. That's not healthy. If you want to do a morning workout, there's all sorts of workout things you can do online now, or just like a deck of cards workout, where for each suit you do a different exercise. You flip over the card, whatever the card is, you do that many burpees or push-ups or crunches. And then definitely have snacks prepared. This happens to me sometimes where I just like keep working and forget that lunch should have been an hour ago. So like make sure you've got your Clif bars nearby and whatever you need to get through the day. Cool. All right, so what are the key ingredients you need to work remotely? Computer, check. Good internet, hopefully a check. Some chat apps, a dedicated workspace. There are definitely elements of kind of discipline and self-motivation that you need to be productive. And I've even found myself in the past week, like being on a Zoom call with somebody where neither one of us says anything for 15 minutes. We're both just like working on the project and we're there connected if we have a question. And I also feel like while I'm listening to him breathe and he's listening to me breathe, I'm not gonna like go play a game on my phone, There's the accountability of, oh, okay, we're working on this. We're both in the same Google Docs, so we can see each other type and stuff. And like, we were putting together the language that we needed to send out to students and judges for like the Entrepreneurship Challenge pitch competition. So, and have a good routine. And this is something, again, you can practice with each day. We're talking about working remotely. The same exact thing applies to what the rest of your college semester looks like. Figure out your routine and eliminate distractions. All right. So you want to prevent yourself from seeing lots of shiny objects. If you want to just stare at a wall instead of being on the kitchen table with siblings and parents, running around doing all sorts of stuff, find a quiet room. Don't have social media app on your phone or on your computer. There's a great plugin for Chrome you can download called Newsfeed Eradicator, which just blocks the entire Facebook newsfeed so you can't get sucked into that dark hole. Being as old as I am, I have no idea how to block TikTok from being distracting, if that's what you're into these days. Clyde's solid reaction. Whatever it is, find times throughout the day where maybe you take a 5-minute break and scroll through it, check on a few things, but don't have it constantly open and feel like, that is reducing your ability to focus on the things you want to get done and need to get done that day. Boom, 10 ways to help avoid distractions. First and foremost, make a schedule. What you put on your calendar tends to be what you spend your time on. And whether or not you were good at organizing a calendar before this moment in time, I'm going to challenge you to get better at it over the next month. Put your classes on your calendar. If you're going to Maybe you can even schedule like Zoom hangouts with friends, your college roommates. I had two of my buddies join a Zoom call the night before St. Patrick's Day with their wives. So 6 of us hung out, had some Guinness, you know, had a pre-holiday celebration via Zoom. Like there's ways to hang out and feel connected even if you are socially distant. Another really important thing to not get distracted is to make sure you get enough sleep. All right. And I recommend 8 hours a night. Stay up as late as you want. Well, maybe you have morning classes, or I don't think any of you are on the West Coast. I know I've got some other students in California that getting up for an 8 a.m. that's now a 5 a.m. That sounds pretty terrible. But it's also important that you eat healthy. You've got a nutritious breakfast. I'm a big fan of the Kind breakfast bars or some fresh fruit. Make a smoothie. At the very least, get something in you. And make sure you have a clean workspace. Don't have 20 papers lined out all over the place. That just leads to more distractions because then you see something like, oh, that thing, I got to do that. Like, try to have it neat and organized. You can also turn off your phone or maybe put your phone in airplane mode. You know, pro tip: if your phone's in airplane mode, the first time somebody calls you, it goes right to voicemail. They call you back right away, it'll ring. So I know I have a couple friends who do this most of the time, and I call, it goes right to voicemail. I just call them right back. I'm like, oh, hey, Mike, what's up? You know, so if people need to get through, they can. And that's do not disturb mode, I guess, not airplane mode. Airplane mode, I don't think it'll ring. And you can also, you know, let people know that you're working and set expectations with your family or your coworkers or whoever, roommates, whoever it might be, that, hey, this is my work time, and I need to be stay focused and locked in here. So how do you focus and kind of follow one course until successful? So these slides are available in the Google Drive, and this title here, 9 Environments That Make Up Your Life, is a link to an awesome article that kind of describes these 9 different environments and allows you to think deliberately about what are you doing to nurture each of these environments, to be aware of when there might be something negative going on in your physical environment or with your body, and what you can do to then improve those. And so basically everything that you sense, if you see, hear, taste, touch, or smell, you know, that's connected to an environment. And the more deliberate and positively you design those work environments, especially when you're home and by yourself, the more beneficial or detrimental it can be. You know, if all you have are bags of Doritos and Oreos, that's probably not going to be as nutritious as having some fresh fruit in a bowl on the table, you know. So thinking about what it is you surround your workspace with. And take a break. Spend 20 minutes a day in nature. All right, science has proven you get at least 20 minutes, you'll get the minimum amount of vitamin D. Seeing some greenery, some sunlight really does a lot to boost your overall mental well-being, your physical well-being as well, stretching your legs, getting some exercise, and just being grateful for how beautiful the trees are. We got cherry blossoms down here in DC. Hear some birds chirping, see people walking a dog. Like, it's nice to get out of the house and make sure you're not isolating yourself. And so Austin Kleon is one of my favorite authors. And these are his 3 pro tips. 1, wear a bathrobe that's got pockets for your notebook in it. All right. A long walk, like I just mentioned, in the middle of the day is great. And buy good coffee beans. Perhaps it's just that simple. And so here's a couple more things from Austin Kleon. The list on the left, really straightforward about how to be happy. And this is a guy who's an author, super creative. He's written several books. And, you know, thinking about the things that can make you happy, it may not have anything to do with what it is you're working on or what your job is doing remotely. So making sure that throughout the day, you create opportunities and avenues to do things that spark joy and to make you happy and kind of fill up your cup, so to speak. And so he wrote this book on the right called How to Keep Going. And I read it maybe a year ago it came out. And it was more about, like, if you're creative, like, how do you push through the resistance and have a hard time? And he realized, and had a whole blog post about, it's actually a guide for working from home. So every day is Groundhog Day. You can do the same thing over and over and over again if you're working remotely. You know, how do you change things up a little bit? building a bliss station. So I believe there's 3 levels of happiness, joy, and bliss. Bliss is like the highest level of happiness. Like you get the body chemicals, you get goosebumps, you really feel great. Think about how you can create a place in your home or in your workspace that fills you up that way and that reminds you of the people you love, your experiences, whether it's, you know, photos of family or teammates or certain clothes or, you know, just things that really spark joy and make you happy. And think about spending a little bit of time every day to create GIFs. It could be, all right, it could be animated GIFs on the computer. That wasn't exactly what I meant, but it could also be like handwritten thank you notes or just small things, notes to people that to say that you appreciate them. And no, you're allowed to change your mind. Like each day you get to experiment, you have hypotheses about what's gonna work or not work. Learning is crystallized when at the end you do some self-reflection and just be honest with yourself about, hey, how productive was I in this environment? Do I need to change the room I'm in? Do I need different headphones? Like, I do feel more legitimately professional with a shirt with a collar on. Like, I feel like, okay, I'm at work if I'm just wearing a t-shirt, if I've got a hoodie on, I just don't feel as professionally productive. So think about your wardrobe and how does that play into it. Number 8 is a great lesson. When in doubt, tidy up. My brain loves this. I'm very aware that anytime I'm like overwhelmed, there's too much going on, I want to control something. The simplest thing you can control is washing dishes. Or like picking something up, putting it back where it goes, organizing your workstation. I'm sure many of you have spent time when you should be studying instead cleaning your dorm room or like straightening things up because you don't actually want to dive in and work on stuff. That's all right. Recognize that your brain, you enjoy that little sense of order, and that can give you some momentum and activation energy to keep working. So there's a joke in here about video conferencing, and you almost never need to use your hands. With the caveat that I found is that giving a thumbs up is a great way to not have to come off mute and say, I get you. Or you can be like this, I don't know, but even that doesn't make a lot of sense. So don't have them up here. Don't be like stretching back here, you know, just kind of from here up and, oh, how's it going? Sounds great. Cool, let's move on to the next thing. So eye contact, this is an interesting concept of where do you want to look and how do you make the audience or the other people on the video chat know that you're looking at them. And I think a good rule of thumb is about 2/3 of the time to be kind of staring right at the camera. You know, I have a second monitor here and I deliberately put all of your faces on my main monitor. So I feel like I'm talking to you. I can glance at what the slide is that you all can see. But primarily I want to be focused on you. And I don't have my phone up here. I might from time to time glance down at it. But again, you're not just like drifting off, paying no attention. And if you do need to look away, as I mentioned earlier, just turn the video off for a second. There's nothing wrong with that. And so here is several different examples of people's facial expressions and body language. So I think we've talked earlier in the semester about the fact that 93% of communication is nonverbal. And it's not the words you're saying as much as the tone and also how your face reacts to things. And this is something that I've definitely experienced firsthand in the past week, is my face tends to react immediately when somebody says something. It's often not positive. I might be like, what? Or like, and I realize like, oh, shoot, one, they can see me. And that it also means for you, whether you're the person speaking or one of the audience participants, hopefully you all, well, I don't know if you do, but there's like the, there's speaker mode and then there's gallery mode in Zoom. So like I have it in gallery mode where I can see everybody's face. Sometimes you just see the speaker, but if you're participating and you can see everybody else's face, you're able to read their reactions. And this is more information you can gain about how are people perceiving and reacting to the whatever is being discussed at that moment. And so another important thing to read is people's eyes. And as the eyebrows get open and the eyebrows go up and they start to smile, hey, this means they're interested in buying. You know, these are all positive signs. And being able to read people's body language, understand when they're like, oh yeah, that sounds great, versus when they're like, or if they're totally spaced out on their phone and not paying any attention, pick up on that as well. So I found a couple surveys online of what are the #1 challenges with remote work. So first and foremost, absolutely communication. And this is why so much of what we've talked about thus far is helping you to think about how do you communicate with others, both sending messages as well as receiving. And then also creating social opportunities and times to, you know, I spend a fair amount of time in my regular workday just chatting with people, you know, about the local sports team, the weather, what their plans are for the weekend, if they're going on vacation. I definitely think loneliness and isolation is going to increase as people are kind of becoming socially distant over the next couple of weeks and months. So being deliberate about ways to connect, reduce some of that isolation, and be ready just to listen and like be a good friend to talk to, whether it's coworkers or friends from Georgetown, family members. Like, I think you and the people you care about will all benefit from some more deliberate communication. And then obviously setting boundaries. I'm sure there are people that are checking their emails, lying in bed, trying to fall asleep and stressed out about a late email from their boss. And also people who wake up first thing in the morning, instead of like easing into the day, they're like, oh my God, I got these emails, I gotta do it. All this bad stuff happened. Like, set the boundaries, maintain them, and you'll be a lot more effective. So here's a second survey from another source I found where, again, top 2 was collaboration, communication, and loneliness. And a lot of people struggle to unplug, which is also why, you know, I keep hammering home this principle of being able to set these boundaries and unplug, and like, don't have your laptop open all day. Don't have your phone in your hand or in your pocket all day. Like, spend some time, just like sit on the couch chilling, or, you know, I don't know if I mean, I have no idea what it's like to be back at your parents' house and have to have meals with them. But perhaps don't bring your cell phone to the dinner table is a good rule. Like, you got all the rest of the day to be on your phones and doing lots of things. Like, try to carve out 30 to 60 minutes where you can just be present in human form. I doubt that this is the ideal situation for you as college students to be back with mom and dad, but make the most of it. And, you know, some of the other challenges include staying motivated. I think the more you externally set some accountability things and tell certain coworkers you're going to do something by a certain time, you'll be motivated to do it. There's also this great principle of when you have a project or like a paper you have to write for school, as soon as it's assigned, open up a Word document, title it, put your name on the top, save it, you're 50% done. You are literally 50% done with that project because you've started it, all right? It's so hard to get the, in physics, it's called activation energy, like the momentum to start working on something. But if you just open a Word document, put the title on there, jot down some random notes, it doesn't have to be in any particular form. And then you just know if you have an idea 2 days later and the paper's not due for a couple weeks, just throw it in the Word document. There's a place to put it, and it doesn't just like sit in your brain or kind of float away. And you're like, I'll do it later. I'll just cram the night before and write something. Like, I encourage you to look at your classes, whatever the updated syllabus things are, and just make the documents. Like, everything's going to be done remotely. I'm sure there's lots of Word documents and other things you need to put together. Just start naming them, and then you'll feel a lot more organized and be able to have the motivation needed. The greatest error in communication is assuming that it's taken place. Can everybody please click the participation button and say yes if you have read this slide? This is great. Wow, should have done this sooner. Look, we're all communicating. There you go. It's that easy, and then I can clear it. Boom. And that is truly important, not just in like a, hey, did you read this slide? But in all forms in which you communicate, often what you say is not what the other person hears. And so asking somebody in a meeting or after a conversation, like, hey, can you just play back what you heard just to make sure we're on the same page? And then you can say, oh, great, you know, yeah, you got like 90% of it. That was most of what I said. The one thing you missed is this. Let me add that in and make sure we're clear. You know, the deadline is next Wednesday, not next Tuesday, whatever the thing is you want to change. So you want to keep calm and over communicate when working remotely. And so over communication is definitely an art form. And as organizations get bigger, it can get more chaotic and informal, or it can get more organized and hierarchical. It's not necessarily a linear path. And so when you join your companies this summer, I think being deliberate in asking people about the kind of communication protocols and best practices, and how do people talk? Do they always start an email with like, "Hi, Clyde," and then go into it? Or sometimes do they just do like Clyde hyphen go into it? Or when it's the second email in a thread, do they not use names at all and never even need to sign it? You just have your kind of default signature there at the bottom. I think you can, if you're aware and deliberate in trying to understand how your company communicates, pick up on it pretty quickly. And this is a great like one-on-one conversation topic. I wouldn't ask in a staff meeting, "Hey guys, how do you like it when we address emails? Like, what should I?" That might not be necessary for the whole organization, but asking a couple people, just, "Hey, what are the best methods of communication?" And certainly for your boss or supervisor, ask how they prefer. Do they want emails? Do they want texts? Do they have work boundaries? Are they not working on the weekend? Whatever it is, try to meet them where they are. And so here's a working definition of over communication. It's basically taking ownership and ensuring alignment with the key stakeholders, making them aware of decisions, where you are in the product development process, and trying to reduce any rework, surprises, unexpected things, or overall chaos in the organization. And you want to push yourself to go above and beyond the simplest, kind of most basic, straightforward communication. And if you send somebody an email, send them a text right after and just say, "Hey, I just sent you an email. Let me know what you think." I work with a few different folks, and I've set the expectation, like, I get emails. If you need a response, text me right away and I'll go look at it on my phone. Like, I have my phone, but I don't look at my emails on my phone. Another thing I might recommend too, turn off your email notifications on your phone. I don't have the little icon that says, "Hey, you have 17 unread emails." It's stressful, and it makes your brain be like, "Oh, I want to check that notification. I want to turn it to 0." So if you just go into your settings and turn off email notifications, you can have unread emails and it's not going to bother you, whether or not you're as OCD about notifications as I am. It helps. So here's a very complex flowchart about how communication actually works. If you were like a product manager, you got an engineer reporting to you, you report up to directors, got a VP. It's not just one direction or you flow into somebody. There's cross-channel communication. They have meetings that you are not in. You may run into somebody while you're getting a coffee, and talk to them about something, but then their boss didn't know what it was. So just be cognizant that communication is going to flow in lots of directions, and you want to help streamline and over communicate in those directions, as opposed to creating confusion and ambiguity. So really powerful project management framework here called the RACI method, RACI. So somebody's responsible. Only one human can be responsible. Remember, we talked earlier at the end of meetings, you want to identify who's responsible for that action item being completed, and then who's accountable. So oftentimes one employee is responsible and either their supervisor or their direct report is also accountable. And then folks that are consulted are people you need their input. They could be anywhere in the org chart. They could be up, across, below. They could even be external people that you need to consult to get information from them. They might be a SME, which is a SME, which equals a subject matter expert. So you might want to consult them. And then last but not least are people that are informed. They have nothing to do with the project and they want to know how it's going on. And so for being informed, I'll share this too, as a manager and as you go up in your career and you work your way up, you want to spend less time responsible and accountable and more time consulted and informed. I love being informed. It means I don't have to do anything. I get CC'd on the emails, I see them, I delete them in about 1 second. I have actually seen several of my direct report Maggie sent probably 50 emails in the past 2 days coordinating different advisor office hours. And to the advisor, I'm CC'd. I know what's going on. If I need to chime in, if somebody has a question she can't answer, I know what's going on. So it's really good until your boss tells you don't CC me on things, just CC him on stuff. Let them know what you're working on and what kind of progress you're making. And then here is an example of an update email. So the top left one is the template, and then the bottom right one is an example of what you would actually send for an update email. So when you're trying to communicate things, TLDR, if you don't know what that is, too long, didn't read. So you're going to have a bunch of stuff there. This is a great practice. I think most humans in this day and age know what TLDR is or what it means. But like, what's the executive summary? In 1 to 2 sentences, what's the purpose of this email? And then you want to go into flagging up front any issues. You know, is the project off track? Is the timeline now delayed? And I like the way they frame it too, as saying, based on what is the new information that's changing the decision. So if you just had a meeting and that affects how you're going to do something, you know, based on the meeting, we've decided on the following. And at the end of the meeting, make sure you have either consensus or agreement, or somebody said, hey, we're doing it this way, to say, hey, here's the things that we can share with the other folks on the team who weren't in the meeting. And to achieve this, the following needs to happen. And then action items, and make sure that they're all assigned to somebody and that they have a due date. And so on the top right, it kind of shows the difference between an update email, which is usually targeted at the C's, and a status update happens more periodically, and that's going to the larger list so everybody's informed what the status is. Anyone have any questions about the kind of update email and how to over communicate? Cool, so we're gonna keep rolling through. We got about 5 minutes left. This is a beautiful Venn diagram of the differences between spoken and written communication. And it's important that you think about how it is you're using your words and what are the things you want to say to communicate your message. And if you're saying it in a video conference meeting, it's very different than writing it in an email. There's often a much more formal tone when you're writing things. Like you might sign best regards. I don't think I've ever said best regards out loud except for right now, you know, but what are the formal things you want to communicate via email? The nice thing with the written word is that you can be more deliberate in your logical structuring and kind of put a few paragraphs out there, realize like, oh, actually I want to move this one up here. Never bury the lead. So like I think it comes from newspapers where like they put the lead article on the front page, like whatever the lead message is, the most important thing you're communicating, make sure that's in the first 2 sentences. Maybe it's even in the subject. You know, maybe you bold it. There are a lot of ways when you're communicating written format that you can make sure people know exactly what's important. So I wanted to briefly touch on computer science principle of synchronous versus asynchronous communication. So what we're doing right now is synchronous communication. We're all synced up, we're in the same time, on the same planet, communicating with one another. In the digital age, much of the communication is now asynchronous. You don't have to be in a meeting, all right? You can work on a project, send an email. It's a perfect example of something that's asynchronous. You send it at a certain time. You don't know exactly when someone's gonna read it. So one of the most important features of good asynchronous communication is the concept of a read receipt. So if you read somebody's email, just tell them you read it. Say, hey, thanks, I got this. I'll work on it, I'll give you an update, you know, when I make some progress. Or if you're able to do it in 5 minutes or less, just do it right then and say, hey, it's done. But it's really helpful because especially with your boss or coworkers, like they don't know, are people getting my messages? We're all working remotely. You know, if you see it on your phone late at night, say, hey, just saw this, I'll take a look in the morning, you know, and set expectations. You have the ability to kind of be accountable and set your own deadlines, and be thoughtful. Look at your calendar, figure out when you're actually gonna have the time to do this project or task or item that came up from the asynchronous communication, and then set a realistic time for when you'll be able to complete the task and just let them know that you saw it. And our cell phones do this all the time. If you send somebody a text message, you know how it changes colors when it's been read. Give me some sort of a head nod if that makes sense. Yeah, cool. Oh, Clyde, great use of your hands. That was excellent. Nice. So one more thing on just the different types of asynchronous communication versus synchronous. You know, obviously a phone call is synchronous. If you're Skype or Zooming, if you have an in-person meeting, that's going to be synchronous. A lot of things, though, can be done asynchronously using virtual tools. Programmers will often use different asynchronous ways to collaborate on designing code. And so I want to wrap up just with reiterating the importance of transparency and to do your best to attend calls and meetings on time. Get there a minute or two early if you can. If you're the host, try to start the meeting 5 minutes early. You know, you're going to say, and this is actually also true for conference calls. There's a lesson in there too. Start the conference line. Somebody joins. Hi, who just joined? Oh, great. Yeah, we're just going to give it a couple minutes, wait till everybody else joins, we get started. Every single time you hear that bing, and when you're on a phone, you can't see people's face, you don't know who it is. Just say, hi, who just joined? And let them announce themselves. You're able to have a running list of who are the attendees. If you're waiting for a certain stakeholder, your boss or the CEO or whatever it is, you're not going to get started till they join. And I think it's even good practice if somebody joins later in the session or in the conference call to say, hi, who just joined? And just make sure that everybody knows that there's another participant. If you need to take a break or if you're going to be offline, let your boss know, let your colleagues know, put a, Slack has like ways you can say, hey, I'm out of the office. Whatever you need to do, just be transparent. And realistically, if you're working from home, you should be prepared for somebody from work to contact you from 9 to 5 and not be surprised. Don't be like, oh, hold on, let me get a shirt on, you know, let me get ready. Like, be prepared for folks to call you or video chat you while you're working remotely. And the last one about using open channels, that means like group chats or, you know, places where everybody can see the message as opposed to just a private chat or a one-on-one communication, because it might be useful information for other folks on the team. And this title here is a link to a good article you can check out later. And last but not least, the Pomodoro technique. Can I get a yes or no in the chat box? Are you guys familiar with this? Have you heard of this before, yes or no? So basically, it is well suited for folks with ADD or anybody who can't sit still for 8 straight hours, where you should work diligently for 25 minutes and then get up and take a 5-minute break. All right, and recognize that if you're just going, your focus decreases, your mental stamina runs out. And I think earlier I mentioned like take a 5-minute break and scroll on Instagram. Work for 25 minutes, 5 minutes on Instagram. You know, work for 50 minutes, take a 10-minute break. Go walk outside, stretch your legs. It's a really effective way to stay sharp and kind of get back to work and be reinvigorated or motivated for the rest of the day. So highly recommended. It's also, yeah, there's a related thing for working out called like Tabata sprints, where you sprint as fast as you can for 20 seconds, jog for 10 seconds, sprint for 20 seconds, jog for 10 seconds. You do that for 4 minutes. It's a phenomenal 4-minute workout. All right, you're giving yourself, you're stressing, and then you're recovering, stress, recover. You know, your brain works the same way as your body. So thinking about what are those cycles like in order to